All right, welcome back to Thrive America. I'm joined by a very special guest, Bill King. Bill is the co-founder and CEO of Axiom Franchise Advisors. Bill, thanks so much for coming on our show.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Brian.
We're glad to have you. I want to address this segment from a financial point of view. So as you're answering the questions, I want you to think about the financials and the recession that we're working through and some of the things that you can help educate me on from a franchise, getting a franchise, how to survive in the recession with the franchise, those kind of things. Let's start with a little bit of what we were talking about offline from the qualifications a entrepreneur needs to have from a financial standpoint to even talk to a potential franchisor to get a franchise. What kind of, from a financial standpoint, what do they need to have in place?
Well, there's at least two measurements or two metrics that most franchisors are going to be looking for, and that is what is the liquidity and the net worth position of the client. And the client should expect, if they're going to find an investment quality franchise opportunity, that very minimally it's going to require about $50,000 liquid. In fact, I would suggest to you the sweet spot is closer to $75,000 to $100,000 in liquid assets. Liquid assets being cash, stocks, bonds, anything that can be converted into cash in a 30-day period and not encumbered, such as retirement programs and so forth. The other metric is the relationship between liquidity and net worth. And net worth, essentially, by definition, is you take everything that you're worth and you subtract everything that you have outstanding in debt, and that resultant number is really your net worth. And the net worth requirement by most of the investment quality franchise companies we represent would require somewhere north of 200. The sweet spot, again, 250 to 350, better than the lower number. But it's the relationship between those two numbers.
Gotcha. Okay, so we got that covered, and maybe now you have more of a feel. If you're thinking about getting a franchise, you might now have more of a feel and take a snapshot before you might go to talk to someone like Bill and see if you qualify. And if you do, we'll talk now about what the next step is. Why on earth would I want to start a franchise now?
Well, we're going to suggest to you that it's a fabulous opportunity if we can help you understand that no matter how challenging the economic times are, and God knows we're in those now, aren't we? There's always a place for the entrepreneur. And we're going to suggest to you that it's a fabulous time to start. But before I get too specific, what if I reminded you that 16 of the 30 companies comprising the Dow were actually started in recessionary periods? And if you need a couple of names to become more familiar with, that would include Disney, GE, HP. These companies saw these kinds of economic challenges as actually their opportunity, less competition perhaps. There might be more creative financing mechanisms that wouldn't really be available to them in a different kind of environment. They can propel themselves and accelerate through the ramp-up periods better because maybe they acquired something from somebody else that really failed at their business. They not only can come in and it's in place, but they might have acquired it at 10, 20 cents on the dollar. So we're telling our people, and not as a random suggestion, we're saying and would talk very specifically in our consulting role to our clients that there are certain kinds of franchise systems that actually flourish in these kinds of times and that might be beneficial for our client to explore. For example, IT services. If anything in your studio went down today, you're virtually out of business. It doesn't matter whether or not your stocks are off 40%. You're going to need to have somebody come at that moment and do this repair. You have a problem with plumbing in your home. You can't wait to unstop the toilet for 2 months until the economy gets better. Haircutting franchises, no matter if you're out of work or whatever, you have to get your hair cut if it continues to grow. So we're saying that you can be selective, and that's really the value of a good consultant, to try to identify those particular industry sectors that are actually going to do well and flourish in these kinds of challenging times.
So it sounds like your firm really navigates and works with the individual entrepreneur, figuring out what their strengths are, what their skill set is, and then like you said in the very beginning segment, you match the strengths of the entrepreneur with the strengths of the franchise. And I love what you're saying about how now during this time there are certain industries that are thriving in this economy and doing well, and opportunities right there are great. So in talking about finance, I want to have the last question for this segment is the finance of franchise. Walk me through
Sure.
that process.
Well, first of all, that's a question on the mind of every entrepreneur. The entrepreneurial spirit doesn't wane during these kinds of times, but it does present more creativity and more challenges perhaps on the financial side. Up to this point in time, there were two finance mechanisms that were rather commonly used to acquire a franchise system. First of all, because of ease of access, was home equity. I mean, it's your money and it's available to you, and it's rather simple, or was rather simple, to have access to that money. Well, the other was 401k conversions. A whole industry, and this could be a separate segment as to how you utilize those kinds of funds. But if you'll just understand that if you're like everybody else in America or anywhere else in the world that might add a dilution of their value due to this recessionary period, those might not now be your best option to finance these kinds of acquisitions. You can still go to the SBA lenders, but in character, they're no different than what's going through the banking industry right now. They're looking for higher credit scores. You can get the money, you just have to qualify at a much higher level. Probably going to need a credit score 700, 720 and north of that, and probably more securitization, more collateral, as we call the loan to value, the LTV. Commonly, you should be expected in these kinds of times to come to the table with about 30% of the total cash requirement to acquire a franchise system. So if that's $100,000, you're going to need $30,000 to borrow the other 70. But here's the good news that comes out of all the bad news. In these kinds of times, the franchisors are stepping forward and in many cases offering special finance programs that are unprecedented. And it allows the entrepreneur really to have available to them ease of finance, ease of access to get into the business quicker so that they can start these businesses and get them to a point where they're producing revenue, working toward profitability, because they're not filling out paperwork for an SBA loan. And the franchisors, if you think about it, it's a great mechanism for them as well, because there's really no cost to that money. They're really deferring what they would have collected from you up front in license fees and so forth. But franchising is about, if you're on the franchisor side, franchising is about the collection of the royalties. And this kind of finance allows them to get the entrepreneur into the business, get them to mature that business quicker, and therefore they become the beneficiary of having access to the collection of those royalties. It's a great opportunity. I will suggest to you that when business gets good, these are going to go away.
So it sounds like here we're learning that the franchisors, there's certain opportunities out there for you to really take advantage, whereas in no time before this has ever been available. Some of these opportunities, some of these franchises are wanting you and want to work with you on ways you can come in as an entrepreneur and take advantage of some of these financing options. Bill, we're going to bring you back. I want to learn about does buying a franchise mean that it's going to guarantee my success? So we'll have you back in just a minute to talk about that.
Great.